I would like to explain about again we will start by defining philosophy. As I have explained last week, that if we are trying to get definition about philosophy, of course there is no single definition of philosophy. You can read many books, and all books of philosophy will give different ideas or different definition about philosophy. However, last week I have explained to you all that we will see philosophy in this context as method of thinking. So it's about critical thinking. It's about how we think very deeply on ideas, and also how do we use philosophy as a method in developing science. So today I would like to give you some more ideas about how philosophy developed within human civilization. If we are trying to understand philosophy, so among important thing that we have to understand is that philosophy was not coming instantly. It is not coming directly to the human life, but it is a process. It is a evolution from the way human beings perceive their life. So before philosophy became one of ways that human being can use to understand their world, or our world, our life, human being rely deeply on what is called myth. Myth, if we translate into Indonesia, is mythos. So in understanding the world, before human being use philosophy or employ philosophy as a method, they rely deeply on what called myth. Myth is a context where people rely on something like legend, something like stories, something like what we call in bahasa Indonesia hayalan. So it's imagination to understand the world. And also they believe in irrational thinking. So for example, in understanding the universe, they rely on what we call science of the natures. Science of the nature, we can translate it loosely as pertanda alam. So in understanding the world, human being before the age of philosophy, they rely on pertanda alam, or the science of the natures. Something like thunderstorm. They believe that thunderstorm is part of natural phenomena, but also it is part of sign that God has sent to human being about something will be happening. So this is the myth. I would say that in our situation now, myth is not completely absent from our life, because in our daily life actually some myths are there. For example, we believe in something based on some phenomena or the science of the nature. For example, what they call people believe in what to call bintang 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 kemukus. Yeah, for example, they believe that bintang kemukus is a sign of the disaster. The disaster will happen in our country if in the morning they see bintang kemukus during the dawn. Dawn mean DAWN mean Fajar. During the dawn, they see the bintang kemukus and they believe that it is actually part of the science of the nature that disaster will happen to our country, our life, or our situation. So all this called myth. I would say that you have your experience, whether it is direct experience, you experience this directly, or you listen, you hear experience of people regarding the myth. And this is the context before philosophy came as a method of thinking. People think of the world using myth as a method. Okay, then after the age of myth, then people transform, or people try to understand this world more rationally. So come an age that that is called the age of logos. Logos means science. So you can see anything scientific, it's called like something like logos, yeah. For example, science about people, about society is called sociology. So it is the context that logos is a context in human being civilization, that they don't believe anymore in myth, but they believe in rational thinking. And in gaining knowledge, they use question. So the question is the source, one of the primary sources of knowledge. So how do you get knowledge? It is basically by asking. If you don't ask, if you don't have question, I think it is difficult for us to have knowledge. So the shift, mean perpindahan, yeah. So the shift from mythos to logos, or from myth to logos, also changed the way people gain knowledge. In the past, before the philosophy, people try to understand our world, our life by believing myth. So after philosophy, part of the method of human being life, so they propose question. So they propose question. If you don't have question, so you don't have knowledge. So basically, rational thinking in human beings life is started from question. That's why in class, for example, in our lecture, in our study, people are encouraged to ask. But maybe our tradition or our culture is a bit different, because if we see our friend propose, or ask question in the class, and maybe he or she ask question too much, and then we feel a bit irritated. We don't like people ask too much, while actually asking is means, yeah. Asking question is means to get knowledge. So this is the beginning of philosophy. Okay, yeah. So the beginning of philosophy, or rational thinking within human being life, is started by asking question. So again, question is one of the sources of knowledge. Okay, so how do we study philosophy? Actually, many people ask, how do we study philosophy? If philosophy is important, so how do we study it? Can we study philosophy by memorizing names of philosophers? Or can we study philosophy by memorizing the chronological events of the philosophical thinking, or any other ways? So I would like to propose 4 methods or 4 approaches in studying philosophy. The first one, what I call thematic approach. And then the second one is historical approach. The third one is what I call in bahasa Indonesia I call it pendekatan tokoh, or we can say it philosopher approach. And then the last one is mixed method between the three. So I will explain one by one from the first. By thematic approach mean that we study philosophy by studying the branches of philosophy. We will talk about the branches of philosophy later on, but by thematic mean that if you want to study philosophy, you can start it by studying the branches of philosophy. As I have indicated last week, among the branches of philosophy is epistemology. Epistemology is loosely translated as science about science. If you are curious about where actually science come from, and if you are curious about where actually people form knowledge, so basically we talk about epistemology. And also what they call ethic, for example. If you are curious about if I do something regarding other people or regarding ourselves, is it right or not? Is it right or wrong? If you are concerned about right or wrong in people's or human beings' deeds, actually we talk about ethic. If we talk about the law of thinking that they call logic, so actually we are discussing or we are talking about logic. So thematic approach is an approach in studying philosophy by studying specific topic within philosophy, or in general we study the branches of philosophy one by one in very comprehensive way. Okay. The second one is called historical approach. By historical approach, I mean that we study philosophy by studying the history of philosophy from time to time. For example, we know that philosophy started from Greece, yeah, ancient Greece. Of course, now in our situation in our contemporary world, we still have Greece as an independent country in Europe. But what we call Greece here is ancient Greece, where philosophy started. After Greece, and then you study from time to time about who actually created the philosophy, for example. And then after Greece, actually philosophy went to the east, namely Islamic world, because Greece came earlier than Islam. So Islam inherit philosophy from Greece, and then we know Islamic philosophy. After Islam is we know from the history that Islam had what we call golden age. Golden age mean when Islam was a great civilization. Islam developed any kind of sciences, any kind of rational thinking. And then now we know about Western philosophy. So if you are interested in studying philosophy by studying the sequence of time, the sequence of period, for example, Greek, Islamic, and Western, so this is basically called historical approach. And then the third one is a philosopher approach. What I mean by philosophers is that you study philosophy by studying individual philosophers. For example, you are interested in studying Socrates, for example, or you are interested in studying Plato, or you are interested in studying, for example, Plotinus, or in Islamic philosophy, you are interested in studying Al-Kindi, for example, or you are interested in studying Al-Farabi, Al-Ghazali, and any other philosophers. If you study philosophy in this way, so actually you are using or you are employing the what I call a philosopher's approach. Means you study philosophy by studying individual philosopher, because we know that every individual philosopher, they develop their own theory, they develop their own understanding of any topics. For example, if you talk about knowledge, so Plato, Socrates, in Islamic philosophy, for example, Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi, they develop their own understanding and they develop their own theories of any specific topic. So again, if you are studying philosophy by this approach, so it's also possible. And the last one, or the fourth is called mixed method or combined method. Mixed method or combined method is a combination of above three approaches. So you studying philosophy by study the history, but you also develop your knowledge by studying the specific topics, or you are also interested in studying individual philosophers. This is also possible. So if you ask me which one is the best, I would say you have your own preference. Every students, every people, every individual, they have their own preference which one is the best. So you can choose among these all four preferences. Are you going to study philosophy using the first, the second, the third, or the fourth method or approach? Is up to you at all. Okay, yeah. So this is four approach in studying philosophy. And now, maybe you are also curious about what is actually called with philosophical thinking. In the first part, I have explained about myth and the shift or transformation from myth to logos, from mythos to logos. And I have also briefly explained what myth, what is the features, ciri-ciri, yeah? What are the features of mythological thinking, and what are the features of philosophical thinking. So now, I would like to attract your attention to discuss or to explain about the features of philosophical thinking. Features mean ciri-ciri, yeah? So what is the features of philosophical thinking? Is any thinking can be called philosophical, or it should be something like this, like that? Okay. So the first one, our thinking can be called can be called philosophical if we have some features. The first one is thinking fundamentally or radically. I have explained what is radical thinking last week very briefly. So the first feature of philosophical thinking is that we are thinking fundamentally, we are thinking deeply, we are thinking radically, and we are curious about knowing the root of the problem. So for example, you have a question about any phenomena, so you don't only ask about the phenomena itself, but you go deeper into the root of the problem. For example, what we call, for example, there is a situation where Muslim in our world, in our situation now, some Muslim do terrorism. So they perpetrate mean melakukan terrorist act. And then when you say that all Muslim are terrorists, so this is not a philosophical thinking, because this is a kind of generalization thinking. We generalize something as it is by looking at very tiny example. So this is not philosophical thinking. And also about terrorism, for example, when you see some Muslim perpetrate terrorist act, so our question should be, what actually the root cause, the root factor that make people do terrorism? And then we see, because they don't have enough understanding of religion. So they understand religion as a legitimacy to be hostile towards others, for example, or maybe because of economic factor, like poverty, because people are poor, they don't have any good or optimistic aspiration about how life should be running, and then they are trapped into action of terrorists. So if this kind of question we propose or we raise, so actually we have employed or we have utilized, we have used philosophical thinking. So the first feature is thinking fundamentally, thinking radically, and thinking to understand the root of the cause. Okay, so that one. The second feature of philosophical thinking is universal. Yeah, universal mean it is about human being, a general experience. So if you have experience, very unique experience, so maybe we have to confirm what we call unique in English might be a bit different, yeah, in terms of meaning from bahasa Indonesia, because unique in English mean satu-satunya, no others, that's unique. But when we come to bahasa Indonesia, unique means something not really satu-satunya, but unique mean ya aneh. So if we talk about uniqueness in bahasa Inggris, in English, actually this refers to that this is, if you say that I have a unique experience, that means that other people don't have experience except you, or you are the only individual, you are the only person who have such an experience. So this is called. So by universal mean it is related to general experience of human being. So all people know that. It is doesn't related to uniqueness, a unique experience. So for example, about experience of fear, you feel fear, you are afraid about something that general people would say, okay, this is very scary. So this is general experience. So the second feature is universal. The third feature is conceptual. Conceptual, yeah. Conceptual mean it is resulted for the abstraction of human experience. Human experience. So we see people experience, people have experience in life, any experience, and then we see that other people also have same experience, and then in other places we also see that people have same experience. So if we see that many people experience the same thing, so then we try to conclude, we try to deduct some conclusion, yeah. So many people experience the same thing. Banyak orang mengalami hal yang sama in many places, di tempat yang banyak, and then we try to deduct. Maka kita berusaha untuk mengambil conclusion of that experience. Because the experience is the same everywhere, gitu. So, and then we deduct a conclusion. For example, you see, I talk about fear. Fear. I talk about fear. So generally, people fear about future life, for example, because of instability. If you are in unstable condition, so we feel that we are worried about future. We are worried about life. And if people in general, if you are in unstable condition, you are optimistic about life. So many or most would say in unstable condition. So then we deduct conclusion. Kita mengambil that in unstable situation people tend to be worried. Dalam keadaan tidak stabil, orang atau manusia cenderung mengalami kekhawatiran. For example, so this is conceptual. So conceptual mean we try to mengabstraksikan experience of human life, and we deduct conclusion, and it becomes clear. So if you are asked where theory come from, where did theory come from? Teori itu berasal dari mana? So we can see one of the source of theory is human beings experience. This is the third feature of philosophical thinking. And then the fourth, many, yeah. The fourth is coherent and consistent. Coherent mean it is not contradictive. It doesn't contradict each other. Coherent mean tidak bertentangan satu sama lain. Ya. Coherent mean it doesn't contradict each other. Tidak bertentangan satu sama lain. For example, in studying philosophy, people raise, I would say, the question, but it is not a valid question. For example, is God Almighty? Is God Almighty? Apakah Tuhan itu Maha Kuasa? Ya. So is God Almighty? And then the answer is yes. God is Almighty. Tuhan Maha Kuasa. And then people who don't like philosophy and then ask again, if God is Almighty, can God create a big stone, very big stone, that God itself cannot lift the stone? Understand the question? Jadi jika Tuhan Maha Kuasa, apakah Tuhan bisa menciptakan batu yang sangat besar, very big stone, that God itself cannot lift it? Jadi bisakah Tuhan menciptakan batu besar, yang batu besar, saking besarnya batu itu Tuhan sendiri tidak bisa mengangkatnya? So of course we don't have to answer this question, because this question is not coherent. It is not coherent because it contradicts each other. The first premise and the second premise contradict each other. Okay, in our life, you can see very easily that people think incoherently. Dalam kehidupan nyata kita bisa melihat orang berpikir tidak koheren atau tidak runtut itu so many. especially when you go to social media. You can practice to analyze incoherent thinking or incoherent statement or incoherent conclusion by going into media, into social media especially. And you will see how people debate each other. But in Bahasa Indonesia, they call the debate is debat kusir. Why it's debat kusir? Because no methodology, no theory. People can say anything, crap, yeah. People can say anything rubbish in social media. But then, more fundamental than that, we are trying to understand what actually they are developing. And we can see they develop very incoherent thinking. So later, maybe later in for example, in the middle test, I would like to ask you analyze some incoherent thinking by going into social media, and you can capture some ideas, some debate that represent incoherent thinking. So if their debate is not incoherent, so it is not philosophical. Because by philosophical, it is featured by coherence. Coherence. The spelling is COHERENCE. 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 In Bahasa Indonesia, people usually or often translate it as coherency. Coherency. Coherency means the relation between one idea and other idea. You can see the relation. Okay. And also consistent from the beginning to the last. It's always consistent. I think consistency is one thing. Yeah, you can easily inconsistency is one thing that you can easily find in social media. So incoherence and inconsistency are two things that you can easily find in social media thinking or debate. Okay, that one, the fourth. The fifth, yang kelima is systematic. Systematic mean the view or the idea analyzed should be related each other, and every view they actually convey mean menyampaikan specific messages. So by systematic mean pandangan-pandangan yang dianalisis harus saling berhubungan secara teratur dan dengan maksud tertentu. So that's why in our first meeting I said and I explained that philosophy for me is basically method of thinking, metode berpikir, because it trains us how to think systematically. Okay, and then comprehensive, the sixth feature of philosophical thinking is comprehensive. Comprehensive mean you consider many aspects, not only one single aspect. So comprehensive. That's why, for example, if you are studying English, at least in studying English, you have to study 4 skills: reading, listening, speaking, and then another one is listening, reading, speaking, reading, speaking, listening, and another one is that's basic, yeah. So when you in reading structure, for example, and then you you will see, for example, you will do a test, and one of the tests called reading comprehension. So reading comprehension means that it will test your knowledge about structure or grammar. It tests your ability or your mastery about new vocabularies, but it also tests your ability how to understand. So at least there are three things. It's called comprehension. So by comprehensive mean that in thinking you have to think from many aspects, not only one single aspect. That's called comprehensive. So in bahasa Indonesia we can say comprehensive basically means menyeluruh dan melingkupi semua hal. That's the easiest translation or understanding of comprehensive. Okay, the seventh is free. Freedom of thinking. Jadi by freedom of thinking mean that philosophical thinking is resulted from thinking freely. By thinking freely, it doesn't mean that we don't have limit. Yang dimaksud dengan bebas bukan berarti bebas tanpa batas. But freedom of thinking here means, for example, we try to free ourselves from prejudice. Kita membebaskan pemikiran kita dari prasangka. So, if you think about something, but beforehand you have already had prejudice, so it is very difficult to develop objective thinking. As a psychologist later, in treating people, for example, people come to you to consult about their situation. So, in giving advice or in asking question, in attempt to understand somebody's situation, you have tried to free. It's absolute for you to free yourself from any prejudice. Jadi kalau ada orang datang, for example, as a psychologist later, sebagai seorang psikiater atau psikolog, when somebody come to you, konsultasi about something, so you have to free. Kita harus membebaskan pikiran kita from any kind of prejudice, dari semua bentuk prasangka. So you don't have, because if you have prejudice, you will not judge objectively. So you have to learn. You have to listen in order to come to objective knowledge. So sometimes people are very subjective in understanding situation because they have already prejudice or they have already conclusion before listening to people already have conclusion. For example, sebelum membaca orang sudah punya kesimpulan. So we cannot do that in philosophy because it is mean that we are trapped in some kind of thinking. So it is free from prejudice. What kind of prejudice? Social prejudice. Social prejudice related, for example, to stereotype. Stereotype is negative perception about other people, usually because of difference of identities. So stereotype itu adalah pandangan negatif kepada orang lain atau kelompok lain yang biasanya disebabkan oleh perbedaan identitas. Stereotype it's a kind of social prejudice. For example, maybe you have stereotype related to people from certain ethnic ethnic group. For example, orang Jawa itu lambat. For example, it is a stereotype. It is a stereotype or it is prejudice. Ya, orang Jawa lambat. In bahasa Jawa, in Javanese language, yes is called ge, ge. And then people in Javanese context develop a not a stereotype, but then it becomes stereotype that Javanese are usually gah ge, gak kepanggih. Gah ge, gak kepanggih itu means they say yes, 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 but actually no. so yes, yes, but actually no. I have an experience about this. I studied in Australia for 2.5 years, and in my time as a student in Australia, I interact with many people from different kind of cultures and background. And I have a friend who is Australian. Australia is basically a society that practice European culture, Western culture, or we call budaya Barat, nilai Barat. Although they are actually live geographically in the south, yeah. Australia is in the south, but they develop Western way of thinking or Western values. So one day I met my friend who is Australian, and then he offered me drink. He asked me, "What would you like to drink?" And I said, "No, thank you." But actually, I want to drink. Actually, I want to drink. When he offered me, "What would you like to drink?" And then I say, "No, thank you." And then no drink at all. Why I say that? Why did I say that? Why did I say that? Because as a Javanese, I have something like reluctant. If you are offered something, this is part of Japanese ethic, yeah. If you are offered something, even though you are willing, so don't say will. Don't say yes in the first time. But after you are given offer 3 times, then you say yes. So this is part of social. If you don't understand the situation, so it's very difficult. Or if you are aware of the situation, and then when you meet people from Java, and then you say, okay, Javanese are very low, and they like to conceal mean menyembunyikan, hide. They like to hide their real feeling. Jadi orang Jawa itu suka menyembunyikan perasaannya yang sesungguhnya. For example, although in some context it is true, but if you use this in thinking, so it is prejudice. And if we use prejudice, social prejudice, for example, so it is very different, very difficult to think objectively. Okay, another prejudice that will trap our freedom of thinking is called historical prejudice, prasangka sejarah. I don't know exactly, yeah. Maybe some of you from Sunda, yeah. You will not find Jalan Gajah Mada. For example, you will not find Jalan Gajah Mada. I don't know exactly it is true or not, yeah. But why it is so? Why is it so? If it is so, why is it so? Jika memang begitu, kenapa begitu? Nah, itu. Jika memang begitu, kenapa begitu? So, some people say that it is related to historical prejudice. Historical prejudice between the kingdom of Majapahit and the kingdom of Pajajaran, for example. And if you bring this prejudice in friendship, for example, between Sundanese and Javanese, So we will not get freedom of thinking. Another is cultural. Cultural, I have explained about Javanese. Javanese is very slow. It's actually cultural. I have an experience. This is my experience when I did my PhD, my doctoral studies in Singapore. I come to an English class. Basically, it's not English, but it's more a speaking class, because as student, PhD student, sebagai mahasiswa S3, we are required to participate all in so many conferences. We are required to present so many papers, and we are also required to present our own thesis, dissertation or something. So we have specific class about the art of speaking. So we have class about speaking. In the class, so many people, around 40 people, but it's come from so many countries. China, Taiwan, also Iran, Indonesia, and many other countries. And what I noticed at that time was Iranian student talk very much, and Indian student talk very much. I think you know that. And in one occasion, in one of the class, the professor said, "Okay, can you stop speaking for a while?" Yeah, because these Indian and Iranian students speak too much, so other students do not have turn to speak. So our professor said to them, "Can you stop talking for a while?" And then the professor asked a question to these two students. Do you think talking too much is cultural? Mereka bertanya, profesor itu bertanya kepada dua mahasiswa dari India dan Iran, apakah ngomong banyak itu bagian dari kebudayaanmu? And then these two students got angry. Mereka marah karena dikatakan bahwa ngomong banyak itu bagian dari budaya mereka. So this is about cultural prejudice. And the last one is religious prejudice. How do you think? What do you think if you meet people of other religion? As a Muslim, and then we meet Christian or Jews or a Buddhist or the follower of Buddhism or any other religion. Maybe if we don't have enough experience of encounter, jika kita tidak punya pengalaman yang cukup baik di dalam berinteraksi, maybe the first thing will come to our mind is prejudice. Ketika bertemu dengan orang lain, pertama-tama yang keluar adalah prejudice. Prejudice mean prasangka. Prasangka adalah, orang Kristen, orang begini, for example. I myself, I have studied religion for very long time. I also studied religious studies. Religious studies mean not only Islam, but also any other religion. In 2017, I was an international fellow. It's called in bahasa Indonesia Duta Perdamaian Agama, for one foundation founded by Saudi Arabia, but the office is in Austria, Vienna, Austria. So during 2017, 2018, 2016, 2017, I very often come to Europe, to Australia especially. I met so many people, young leaders of religion. So people from Yahudi, Sikh, even Sikh, Christian, Hindu, Buddha, and etc. My feeling about Jews is like orang-orang Yahudi itu pasti jahat. So my understanding and my prejudice of Jews itu Jews must be evil. Orang Yahudi itu pasti jahat. And then from airport to hotel, I was picked up by the committee, by the organizer. After meeting the driver, I said, okay, let's go. But the driver said, no, we have to wait one other participant from United States. So we wait for this guy from United States, and it is and she's a woman. And then finally she come, and then we went to the car. In the car, I had conversation with her. I asked her, where are you come from, or where are you from? And then he said, I'm from United States. When she said I am from United States, he said it arrogantly. Jadi ketika dia mengatakan saya orang Amerika itu ngomongnya sombong gitu. And then I have prejudice. Oh, dasar orang Amerika, makanya sombong. So I said in my thinking, oh okay lah, you are arrogant because you are American. And then I asked her religion, because we were meeting as leaders of religion. So I asked her religion. So from which religion are you? From which tradition are you? And she said, I am Jewish. Saya Yahudi. And then I said, with more arrogant expression. So I said to myself, okay, pantaslah dia sombong, sudah Amerika Yahudi lagi. So you can see, this is prejudice. Because I have prejudice, I cannot think freely. I don't have freedom of thinking. So in real life, we have tried to put aside, menyingkirkan, mengesampingkan all kind of prejudice, especially social prejudice, historical prejudice, cultural prejudice, and religious prejudice. Okay, yeah. Okay, the eighth, ya, yang ke-8 is responsible. Responsible mean that we have to, if we have certain kind of thinking, you have to be responsible to our own thinking. Yeah, we have to be responsible. So in this context, thinking cannot contradict our heart actually. Can you think something that contradict your heart? Bisakah Anda berpikir tentang sesuatu yang bertentangan dengan hati nurani? I don't think so. Again, this is experience. I wrote many articles in media, not social media, in media, newspapers, magazines, even books. And some of my opinion or some of my thoughts are seen as controversial by people. Some people see me as controversial writer or controversial thinker. And then one day, my friend asked me, if you think, if you write something, or if you write a theory or an analysis, is it coming from your heart? Oh, so because I have some thinking that people see it as controversial, so they ask me like that. Jadi saya menulis banyak di media massa, and some of my thinking is seen controversial. Banyak orang melihat beberapa pemikiran saya kontroversial. And one day, satu hari, one of friend of mine datang ke saya, seorang teman, dan bertanya, apakah yang kamu tulis itu berasal dari hatimu? So I said, look, I will not write something if it is not coming from my heart. I will not write something if it is contradictory to my heart. Or I will not write something if it contradict each other with my head. So this means responsible. Okay, so at least not at least, yeah, it is important for us to understand this clearly. So the feature, there are 8 features of philosophical thinking. The first one is thinking fundamentally. Second one is universal. Third one is conceptual. Fourth one is coherent and consistent. Fifth is systematic. And then sixth, comprehensive. And then freedom, freedom of thinking, mean free from prejudice. That is mostly for social prejudice, historical prejudice, cultural prejudice, and religious prejudice, and responsible. So they are 8 features of philosophical thinking. Okay, so that's the most important point of our lecture today. If you have any question, we will end our class in 3-minute times. So if you have any question, any comment, or any other thought, you can say here by writing in the chat column, or you can talk directly. Okay. Any question? Okay, I will unmute you. Okay. So if you want to speak, just unmute your microphone by yourself. Okay, please. Any question?
I have questions, sir.
Yes.
When we thinking fundamentally about ism or something, some item of content enters consciousness. What does this cause or enable or modify?
Okay, maybe you can formulate in other sentence. So if you think about ism,
When we think about ism, some item enters consciousness.
Okay, and then
What does this cause enable modify in our team?
Okay, so if I understand your question clearly, so of course some thinking will influence some ideas, you call it ism, will influence our consciousness, our thinking. So for me, it is important for us to study as many thought as possible. So don't limit yourself to one thinking, because if you limit yourself, if we limit ourselves to studying one thinking, so the possibility or the potential to be fanatical is very high. Why people are fanatic? Sometimes people become